create perhaps a better atmosphere. Now, to summarize, I think that many of you also already mentioned this, but information is interpreted. And communication is making in common and sharing. But people tend to relate to previous knowledge, like we talked about the frog. We need a reference. It's actually impossible for humans to not to relate to something that is already known. And every time you communicate with someone, well, what do you see here? What's this? Anyone? How do you perceive this figure that came up here? A wine glass, yes, thank you. Many people tend to see a wine glass. But really, it isn't a full wine glass, it's incomplete. But we do have a tendency to fill in the gaps so that everything becomes meaningful to us. And at the same time, we tend to disregard information that we perceive as meaningless. So if you ask your doctor students to read a few extra papers in order for that student to learn something, well, if it's too, the information it's too new, it doesn't really link to anything that student know previously, it might actually be hard for the student to notice the new piece of information if we don't perceive it as meaningful. So we have a tendency, human tendency, to seek for meaning in every time we meet with someone or in every social situation. And you will talk much more about how expectations influence interpretation. You will talk to Björn about that when you talk about intercultural communication, and of course this also has to do with communication between, I wouldn't say men and women, but we can still talk about the gender-based, and if we look at the research, we can talk about the female way of communicating and the male way of communicating. Doesn't mean that every woman, every man, every well, if you're not this is and so forth. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit longer, and then you're going to do a sort of a role play, so you know that online as well. So please hang in there for just a few more minutes before you can stand up and do a short break. When we communicate with each other, whether or not we like it or not, we can say that, or as a model of communication, we can talk about a task-oriented way of communicating versus a relationship or person-centered way of communicating. So in every piece of dialogue, communication, there are aspects where we tend to talk about something that is related to the task. And at work, of course, that is important. That's what we tend to do. But at the same time, we are communicating to people whether or not we like them or not, whether or not we feel intimidated by them, whether or not we enjoy